If you are not familiar with the principle of the time value of money and discounted cash flows, then I would suggest you refer to the previous recording. Once you understand those principles, then we can move on to this recording, where we focus on the theoretical or fair value of a bond. Most bonds pay a regular income return to investors, known as the coupon. For most bonds, this amount is fixed throughout the life of the bond as a percentage of the nominal value. For example, 5% of £100 achieves a £5 coupon. For the purposes of the example that follows, we will assume that the bond pays an annual coupon, even though most bonds actually pay coupons every 6 months. In other words, semi-annually. On top of the coupons on the bonds, most bonds are redeemable. This means that the investor is paid back the principal sum and the bond is effectively retired or cancelled, as the bond issuer no longer has any obligations to the investor. When we are establishing the theoretical value of a bond, we need to discount all future cash flows attributable to that bond, both the coupons and the redemption of the principal sum. Whilst all of the examples that follow use decimals in expressing the price of a bond, it is also possible to quote prices in fractions of 1/8. For example, a bond price of 99.875 could also be quoted as 99 7/8, given that 1/8 is 0.125. For our first example, we will use a coupon of 10, a yield R of 10%, and a maturity of 5 years. As you can see from the numbers in the example, once we add the present value of all 5 coupons to the present value of the redemption, 100 discounted in the same way as the year 5 coupon, we get 100. In other words, an investor who has an expected return of 10% would pay 100 today for these returns. This might seem like a happy coincidence, but it isn't. If the bond is returning an annual cash flow of 10, equivalent to the investor's required rate of return, which is also 10, then the investor will pay no more and no less than the par value of the bond, 100. We explored the relationship between bond yields and fair values in the previous video and can prove the relationship again here. If we keep everything the same but increase the yield on the bond to 15%, then the price drops to 83.24. In other words, if the yield of 15% is higher than the coupon of 10, then the bond's fair value of 83.24 will be at a discount to the nominal value of 100. However, if we drop the yield on the bond to 5%, then the price rises to 121.65. In other words, if the yield of 5% is lower than the coupon of 10, then the bond's value of 121.65 will be at a premium to the nominal value of 100. We've attached the Excel file to the recording such that you can download it and identify what happens to the price as you change the coupon, the yield, and the maturity of the bond. We have restricted the inputs such that you can only use certain inputs due to how the sequence function in Excel produces the calculation. Remember to pay attention to the relationship between the yield and the price, especially where the yield and the coupon are the same. Enjoy. If you're looking to further build your confidence in making credit decisions, check out the Global Credit Certificate. It covers everything from understanding the credit decision process to developing the practical skills you'll use every day. Visit the website for more information.